Hello, welcome back. This is part two of the cultural video. So, in part one, we talked about how we can find cultural things everywhere, about basically everything that we can touch or see reveals something about that particular culture, about what's important or what's taboo, what is disgusting, what is attractive, and what is aspirational. What do people want? We talked about the kind of 6 elements of global competence. We can think of that as interpersonal communication. So, speaking to people from other cultures. And we talked about how language and culture are interconnected. It's basically impossible to remove culture from a language. So, therefore, if we're learning a language, then we also need to understand the culture of the language. But because English is a global language, it does not belong to one particular place. We talk about American English and Australian English and British English and South African English and etc. etc. But there are more non-native speakers of English than native speakers of English. So really, English does not belong to a single place. So thinking about culture, to really understand it, we need to break it down into 3 of the 4 most important parts. And that would be the norms of a culture. So we think like the word normal. So what is normal in that culture? The beliefs of a culture and the values of a culture. So let's start from the foundation, a fundamental part, and think about values. Now, what are values? So values are the big concepts that a society thinks is important. And so what I mean by big concepts is they are usually 1 or 2 nouns, and they are big, broad concepts. Family, friendship, honesty, wealth. Yeah, so these are big concepts. These are big and broad and wide. So we can think of values as being these big concepts. Okay, so big ideas, big, broad ideas. They're usually 1 or 2 nouns. And values tend to be shared in many cultures. So, for example, family. It's pretty difficult to find a culture where family is not a valued thing. Okay, I think it's pretty safe to say that every culture in the world values family. So some other examples might be cooperation, collaboration, independence or self-reliance, cleanliness, family, and education. So we can see these are big, broad, wide concepts, but it's something that a culture thinks is really important. Now, the next part is beliefs. Now, here's the connection that what we believe about a value. Okay, so this is where the differences happen. So I said every culture in the world values family. However, what they believe about that value is different. So maybe one culture believes that old, sick relatives should live with the family. So the value is family, the belief is old, sick relatives should live with the family. Or the value could be family, but the culture believes old, sick relatives should stay in a hospital so they receive the best medical care. So the value is the same. The value is family. The belief is old, sick relatives should stay in a hospital. Or the value could be family, but the culture believes, children should live with their parents until they get married. So again, the value is family, but the belief is about children living with parents until they get married. Or the value is family, but they believe that children should move out between 18, 20 or 18, 22 years old. That's international 18 to 20 years old. And become independent. So we can see from this list the value is the same. Family, 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 family. But the belief about that value is different. So we can think of values and beliefs as being invisible because we cannot see it. If we walk into a room, we cannot see somebody thinking that relatives should live with their family. So this exists in people's brains, in people's minds. So some other beliefs might be that education is the value. Everyone should go to university. Or again, family. They should live until they get married. Or maybe the value is love. Having a successful partner, having a rich partner is more important than love. So that might be a belief that someone has. So we have values. Values are broad concepts. The belief is what a society, what a culture thinks about that value. And again, the word think is very important. These are invisible things. We cannot see what someone thinks. What we can see is the norms of a society or a culture. This is what we see. So we see the beliefs in the actions of a culture. So, for example, the value is education, but young people study until late at night to get into a good university. What we see is young people going to hagwons with, stacks of books or heavy bags. That's what we see. That is the norm. All right, so maybe you and all of your friends all went to after-school academies, to hagwons. That was the norm. Most people are doing it. So another example, people in their 30s living with parents. So you ask someone, do you live alone? So, no, I live with my parents, and they're 35. So that's the norm. That's what we see. And that comes from the belief that if the person is not married, they should not move out of their parents' house. Or love. People accepting arranged marriages. So maybe in a culture, their parents are like, oh, this woman is good for you because she's very successful, or she goes to a good university, so she'll definitely get a good job, or he's the son of a CEO, so he's going to be successful, so you should marry that person. So the norms are arranged marriages, for example. That's what we see. So the value is love. The belief would be it's more important to have a successful partner than be in love. And the norm, what we see, is people in arranged marriages or people in loveless marriages, but it's two successful people. So to make this a bit clearer, hopefully you're following, but I'll make it a little bit clearer. Let's look for some connections between the values, the beliefs, and the norms. All of these things are connected. So we think of, so the value might be marriage. Okay, so most cultures in the world have some form of marriage, some version of marriage. However, in this case, so children should live with their parents until they get married. People in their 30s live with their parents. So what we have is the value, the belief, and the norm. So the value, the big concept, what does this culture believe about that? They believe that children should live with their parents until they get married. That's the belief. So what do we see? We see people in their 30s living with their parents, or 40s or 50s, or never moving out of their parents' house if they don't get married. Okay, so these are the connections. They're absolutely connected. Let's have another example. Okay, so let's start with the norm this time. So what do we see in a culture? We see you replace your outside shoes with house slippers before you enter your home. Yep, so you get home from work or the supermarket, you take off your outside shoes and you replace them with some kind of house slippers, or you go barefoot or just in your socks. So that's the norm. This is what we see. But that is based on the belief that the home is clean and outside is dirty. So the home is healthy, the outside is unhealthy. Clean is good, dirty is bad. So that's the belief. So the action of taking off your shoes to go inside is based on the belief that outside is dirty and the home should be clean and healthy. Or maybe it's based on the belief that feet are dirty, feet are smelly. So this is a good example where more than one belief can connect to one norm. And equally, one belief can connect to many norms. And many values can connect to one belief, and so on and so on. It's not simply one. So we can see here that the value is cleanliness. Okay, so the value is cleanliness. From that value, the belief is feet are dirty and smelly, the home is clean, outside is dirty. But the norm, the action that happens from that, is taking off your shoes when you go home or you go to someone else's home. Okay, let's have another example. So again, let's start with the norm this time. So you are watching a culture. What do you see? So staff at a company suggest efficient changes to their supervisor when they're at work. So they're superior. They say, hey, maybe we could try blah, blah, blah to improve the company or to improve the workflow. So that's what we see. Let's imagine we're observing a meeting. That's what we see. Well, that comes from a belief that a good team member looks for new and better ways to do things. And the belief that if you have a good idea, you should tell your boss. And that belief comes from a value of cooperation and collaboration. Okay, so the value is cooperation. The belief is that a good team member tells their boss their good ideas. But what we see, the norm, is staff suggesting things to their boss. Okay. So let's try one more. So again, starting with the norm. So what do we see in a culture? We see teenagers attending test prep classes most weeknights. Yeah, you walk out in the street, the young people are carrying books, they're going into buildings, there's, math schools or language schools or music schools, or there's something, some kind of academy, and we can see that the teens are going in there. And it's most nights, it's not one night per week. So what is this based on? Well, the belief that attending a famous university is more important than learning, or attending a university is the most important thing. And that's based on the value of education. And again, education, many cultures around the world value education, but their beliefs about education might be very different. So, for example, a different culture may believe that only go to university if you have a specific goal that requires university. Otherwise, just finish high school and get a job. So the norm would be only a few people go to university. Or the norm would be you work in an office and there's lots of very young people, lots of 18, 19, 20-year-olds working in your office because they didn't go to university. Because culturally, they believe they don't need to because they don't have a specific goal. So now it's your turn. You've listened to my voice for a long time. So I'm going to give you some ideas, and I just want you to decide which are values, which are beliefs, and which are norms. Okay, so don't worry too much. I'll just give you like 30 seconds. Have a think. Okay. Let's start with values. Okay, so which ones are values? Hopefully these were the easier ones to find. Again, single words, sometimes two words, but they're generally nouns, big concepts: wealth, respect, commitment. Okay, so which ones were the beliefs? Well, hopefully you noticed it was these ones. So women should cover their shoulders in public. workers should not go home until the boss leaves. Working for a long time shows that you are a valuable employee. So that means working for many hours shows that you are a valuable employee. Not somebody who comes in 1 minute before 9 a.m. and leaves 1 minute after 6 p.m. But no, I'm here for 10 hours or 12 hours. Okay. So especially notice that women should cover their... So it doesn't say women cover their shoulders in public. It says women should cover. Okay, so this is kind of showing that it's a belief, right? It's in their mind. So that leaves the last two. So people work late at night, you know. So maybe you get on the subway at 11 p.m. and you see lots of people wearing business clothes. Well, that shows that people are working until late at night. Or shaking hands when you meet somebody. That's something that you see. So the belief would be it's polite to greet somebody by shaking hands. So that's the belief, right? That's what's in their mind. So we've talked a lot about cultures, and we've talked a lot about cultures around the world. However, we should not think about cultures as only being from a country. You know, of course, countries have cultures. However, culture can be very, very individual. And whilst we may all come from one culture, we can be very, very different from each other. We may share some cultural things, but we may also have some quite significant differences. I'll give you an example. So have you ever been to someone's house, a friend's house, and they do things differently to you? They do things differently to your family? For example, their family just eats in silence, but your family chats a lot. Or they have the TV on all the time, even if no one's watching it, nobody's in the room, but your family only turns on the TV to watch like specific programs. Okay, so this was our introduction into cultural components. So we talked about norms, beliefs, and values. Values are big ideas. They're very general, and they are usually shared by most cultures. Some things are specific, but generally most things are shared by many, many cultures around the world. And we talked about beliefs. This is where things become different. So we may have the same values, but cultures might believe something very different. So you may value money. Money is a very, very common value. However, the belief might be happiness is more important than money. Or another culture might believe that money is more important than happiness. So the beliefs can be very different, but the values can be shared. And norms. So values and beliefs, these are often called small c elements, small c components. These are the invisible components. Whereas norms are visible. So norms are what we see. It's the actions. So you go into a culture, the norms are the clothes that people wear, the kind of music that people listen to, the how close people stand, how they greet each other, how they say goodbye, how they argue. This is what we can see. So quite often when we go into a culture that is not our own, we make mistakes in that culture because we can see the norms, but we don't know the beliefs and the values. It's not very obvious. You need to get to know that culture to really understand the beliefs and values. We can see the norms, but the mistakes we make are based on not understanding the values and the beliefs. Okay, so thank you very much for listening to the second video on culture. I hope it was useful. Thank you.